You know the deal by now. This is a podcast where we speak to creative people about what they do and how they think, and occasionally we touch on the X-Files. I'm in a good mood today because I'm off down the travel agents. Yeah, what a novel idea. No more scouring the internet for me, looking for the best deals and an all-inclusive fortnight in Malaga. No, I've just headed down to my local family-owned travel bookers, and they're going to do the work for me. I have to say that in my own personal life I have noticed a shift in how I approach a holiday. Time was when it wouldn't feel like a getaway to me unless I was solemnly walking around Eastern European Museum or an area of significance to the Second World War. But turns out, as a custodian of 2 young people under the age of 8, they're not too keen on that, and in the interest of having a relaxing break, we've ended up going to the beach. You know, fair enough. Anyway, rant aside, let me tell you about today's guest. It's a film distribution and exhibition consultant and now head honcho of Metis Films, Ben Metcalf. Ben is a passionate cinephile and has worked at companies such as Curzon Artificial Eye, Momentum, eOne and Altitude on hits such as Nightcrawler, Mr. Turner and I, Daniel Blake. Recently on the record-breaking horror film Talk to Me, which he talks to me about briefly, and he's also worked on award winners like Spotlight, 12 Years a Slave and 1917. He's recently also set up Metis Films, which is a distribution company, consultancy and development house, and their first film, Mandoob, which means Night Courier, will be in cinemas on August 30th, so do check out the website for that film. Today Ben talks to me about how to keep a film in cinemas, Liverpool, feeling your age, how the UK needs a new Hammer Studios, a bit about therapy, and of course, The X-Files Season 2, Episode 5, Duane Barry, in which Mulder becomes involved in a hostage situation with the escaped psychiatric patient Duane Barry, who claims to have been abducted by aliens multiple times. Brilliant to catch up with Ben and hear about all his new ventures, and I wish him well with Metis Films, as you'll hear. It's really interesting and exciting for the UK film industry. As always, if you like our show, please do leave me a message, subscribe, review, follow us on X, Instagram, YouTube, all that game. Anyway, in the meantime, kick back and join us on an hour-old adventure to pastures new. Here's Ben.
Thanks, mate. Yeah, I'm really good. A lot of stuff's been happening to me in the last few months. And today I'm in Bromley, the sun's shining, which is quite nice.
Lovely.
I've just put some washing up. So, juggling, starting my own company and doing the chores.
Wow. How long have you lived in Bromley? A while?
Only about 2 or 3 months.
Right.
I did live in Newington Green for about 7 years, 6 to 7 years. And then my partner, she has a house in Bromley, and we made the decision to move in together. So, and she has a little dog called Heidi, and there's lots of woods here, so it's very leafy and woody, and I guess the suburbs comes to all of us at some point.
Yeah, you just have to embrace it, man, I think.
Yeah. I thought I was part of the London liberal media elite in Stoke Newington, but the reality was I was sort of renting a flat off a couple of very eccentric, lovely Northern Irish people who did basically live in, and the glamour of what I thought my life was didn't match up to the reality.
Right.
But it was lovely and great. And what you sort of lose in really expensive but lovely sort of French artisanal bakeries, like a few minutes away, you sort of gain in having a dog and nature and seeing a lot of green.
Yes.
And that's much better for my mental health.
Yeah, and you can get back in if you want. You can get on the train. It's not going anywhere.
No, exactly. Exactly. It's like there's a 16-minute train, I think, from Bromley South to Victoria. So it's one of those things, where London sort of, when you discover a new bit of it, London opens up again.
Yes.
And you're sort of mentally mapping out, like, oh my God, this place is massive. Now the whole of like South London is becoming sort of open to me, and I'm just learning about the geography of South London.
Yeah, the sort of jigsaw piece, isn't it? When you it hit me when I lived in East Dulwich. It was like, oh, I can just walk to Peckham, and then Peckham's really close to Camberwell, and then it's just that mindset. I'm not saying I'm going to write a psychogeography novel, but, I'd enjoyed it.
I definitely like to read your psychogeography novel.
Oh, I used to have such a BM about people like Ian Sinclair and those old farts. A good walk ruined. But carry on. Good luck to him. Why not?
Yeah, a really good walk ruined by you telling me about yourself. Oh,
yeah.
God.
Yeah, right.
Just tell me about the road you're on, or the woods you're in, or the seaside town you're going to walk through. I think I'm probably a bit more pretentious than you are, so I do quite enjoy a bit of old psychogeography. There's an amazing book by a guy called David Seabrook called All the Devils Are Here.
Oh, right.
Which is about seaside towns, and sort of particularly about Margate in particular. And what he does in that book is like a particular sort of kismet, like magic spell, where he sort of puts himself in it, but he really, really paints a vivid picture about the sort of dark underbelly of like British seaside towns, and in particular Margate, and talks about Charles Hawtrey, the old Carry On actor, sort of being there and being extraordinarily sort of badly behaved, and talks about a lot of the sort of rumours around what he did, and he was very drunk and very rude to people, and it's really good. It's really amazing.
I'm sort of shocked every time I go back to Margate, from what it's been, where it is now. The fairground's going nowhere, but everything else around it sort of slowly embraces, like you say, the coffee shops, and there's an art gallery, and the cafes are still there, so good on them. So tell me all about Metis Films then, and when did this kind of come to be in?
Well, I suppose to sort of explain about Metis Films, I have to sort of talk a little bit about my career in sort of film. And I've been working in film distribution for 15 years, mostly in sort of theatrical sales, which for people who don't know what that is, it's sort of selling films into cinemas. And there's a whole, in books, in book publishing, you say to someone, I work at a publisher's, and people sort of understand that a bit better. I think when you say to people you work for a film distributor, almost 9 out of 10 of them just say, I had no idea that's what happened. Because no one really thinks about how a film gets to a cinema. They just presume it gets made, and then it's just on the cinemas. It's just on at the cinema. So, but because you and I sort of worked together for a long time.
Well, my mother didn't really understand the concept of press officer. So you imagine a press officer working for a film distributor. That's like, you might as well be an alien. It's just, you just cannot fathom what that is or why you would need that.
But, we are sort of different versions of Tom Cruise from Jerry Maguire.
I should do that. Yeah, maybe that's the way to sell it to her.
we're the people just off camera. When you're on the red carpet, if you see all those people are milling around, not looking like they know what they're doing, that's probably us or you. Yeah,
my sister's boyfriend was like, he was present, I was there, and someone said, oh, what do you do, Chris? And then he piped up and went, oh, he walks people down the red carpet. And I went, yeah, it's about it's about a long and short of it, mate.
That's sort of fair. And so I've been selling films into cinemas for about 15 years, and then, which actually, do you know what? I'm not going to go into it because it's too boring, isn't it?
No, hey, I can cut it. This is the beauty of a pre-recorded podcast. I go, that was 15 minutes. that can go.
Great.
Let's get back to probably.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, no, I'd be really interested because I was going to ask about, you growing up and when you got into films, but it'd be interesting to have a bit of a potted history of your of your career today.
Well, yeah, it also sort of directly informs why I've set up Metis, really. But I basically phone up cinemas and try to get them to play a particular film, and a film is only on in a cinema play week from Friday to Thursday. So every Monday I have to engage in a process known as holdovers. So I worked for a lot of independent studios, eOne. I worked with yourself at Artificial Eye, a little company called Soda, lots of different companies. Momentum when they were still around, and so they all have to do a process called holdovers, which is you basically try and argue with the cinema to keep your film playing for an extra week. And that's the bulk of my that was the bulk of my job, really, for sort of 15 years at different companies. Half of those years was at a company called eOne, and I worked on lots of different films there, really big films like the BFG or Girl on the Train, Stan and Ollie, and sort of 1917, right down to smaller films like I, Daniel Blake, which I really enjoyed that film and working on that, and that being discussed in the House of Commons, right through to very small re-releases of like a William Friedkin film called Sorcerer, which I put put that back into cinemas in 2017. I love that film. So that really is a sort of potted history of kind of what I do. And then as eOne were being bought by a toy company called Hasbro, I was sort of part of the first round of redundancies there, and now eOne, after a few years, doesn't exist anymore. They've been gradually sort of phased out, and I think they were the catalogue was sold to Lionsgate.
Yes.
And so the day before my 40th birthday, I was made redundant from this job I'd worked in for 7.5 years. In 2021, and so from there I sort of did freelance for 8 months. I worked at a company called Film Bank for a year, which sort of non-theatrical space, so sort of selling DVDs into film societies.
Right.
And then I got a 9-month maternity cover at Altitude, and that came to an end sort of just at the start of February. So these recent experiences in the last sort of 2 or 3 years of my career, it really just, and also, we reach a certain age. I'm 43 now, and just thinking, where do I want to keep bouncing around, just doing bits and pieces of work? I was sort of quite typecast into just doing that theatrical sales job, as I sort of mentioned before. And I thought, well, I'm doing lots of other different things. I've always enjoyed writing. I've written a couple of scripts, and I'm really interested in the development side of things. And I always thought that I could hopefully try and distribute films myself. And so really it was just a very natural process. Really, in the last sort of like 2 or 3 months, it's just been a very natural process. It's just been quite organic. I was having sort of 2 or 3 conversations with different filmmakers about their projects and about trying to release them here in the UK.
Right.
And it was getting to a point where I was thinking, okay, if I do this, I can't really do it as a sole trader. I need to set up as a company.
Yeah.
And I need to be having more than just 2 or 3 conversations. I probably need to be having more like 10 or 15 conversations, because the hit rate is sort of like, you'll end up signing sort of 4 or 5 films from having like lots of different conversations.
Yeah.
And so that sort of, I sort of had to launch really in order to sort of nail my colours to the mast.
Yeah.
Is that a metaphor I can use?
Yeah, I think so. Flags. Yeah.
Flags. Yeah. And so that's really just how Metis came about. I'm just going from there. I'm very new. The whole thing is very new at the moment. I've only been doing it a couple of months, but already I'm having loads of different conversations with people. It's really, really fun. Yeah. I'm having lots of conversations about development, which is great.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah. That's really fun. So that's working with producers and filmmakers about trying to develop their films and sort of bring them to market. And what's really nice is that because I have all that distribution experience, that's a real knowledge gap for producers. producers don't necessarily always know sort of how a film gets into cinemas.
No, they don't. And I've been and done panels before with producers, and you just assume, don't you? You just assume that they would know how a film gets out into the world, and what a distributor does, what a publicist does, what the marketing team does. But very straightforward stuff, like I always said. Make sure you have some great images, make sure you have a photographer on set, and people furiously scribbling stuff. Oh yeah, right, okay. Because they don't, because they're so, because the process of making a film is all engulfing and so intense that I guess you've got no brain power, foresight to think of later down the line. So that's really exciting. I mean, is there a kind of film, like a Metis film, like a film that you would go after?
This is a really interesting point, and I've sort of been purposefully kind of oblique at the minute in where I want to go, because I want to cast my net out really, really, really wide. And in terms of the distribution side of things, world cinema films at the moment, just because of the level of where I'm at. But I've always been really interested by sort of genre filmmaking, and by that I mean sort of mostly action, thriller, or horror, really. So if I can, I probably have a preference for world thrillers, actions, or horror films. But really, one of the great things about being at altitude was just seeing how entrepreneurial they were. So they might want to get into the alternative content space and put some plays or concerts on into cinemas, or they've got a film coming out, I think, this year called Grand Theft Hamlet, which is about two out-of-work actors who, during the pandemic, played Grand Theft Auto, found a theatre, and decided to put on a play. They decided to put on Hamlet whilst they're getting shot and playing Grand Theft Auto at the same time.
Right. Wow.
Yeah. So it's sort of like a documentary. But if you'd said to Will Clark when he set up Altitude, is this the kind of film that you want to be doing? You just don't know what sort of films are out there. So I'm very careful, really, to not sort of say this is definitely what a Metis Films is, and this is definitely what a Metis film isn't.
Yeah, I mean, they're great sort of jumping off point, I think, Altitude, because very well respected. And like you say, I don't think you could really, maybe you could say this is an Altitude film or not, but I was trying to think of the right word, bullish maybe, or that's probably the wrong word, maybe like all in, they get a film and they really get behind it, and really films that you'd think, where's that come from, or have you got hold of that, and really get behind it with a great marketing campaign and wild posters, and they do a job on it, do a great job on it. So I think that's a great. I remember working with them on this. What was that boxing film? Like Thai boxing film? Oh, Prayer Before Dawn. Do you remember that one?
Oh yeah.
And ended up going with like Hamish, who worked there, to Liverpool prison to interview this guy who his life was based on it, and we had to took Channel 4 News in to get to interview this guy, and they absolutely ripped him a new one. And I would like to say to this guy from a publicist's point of view, like, look, they can't let you off. You've had this incredible life story, but also you are in the nick for stealing your next door neighbour's TV, mate. So don't expect. And he was like, really. And then the sort of prison warden, it wasn't a warden, but the attendee was like watching this interview go ahead, looking at me like, are you going to intervene? I was like, what am I going to say? Stop asking him about nicking his. He's pleaded guilty to it. So it was really odd. But I thought that sort of crystallised my opinion of Altitude, that of course they're going to go and we're going to set up some interviews in Liverpool, Nick, and and really do a good job on it. So I like that.
I released during my time there. I released the Australian film Talk to Me. And that really worked. But like we released it like a week after Barbenheimer, and no one else released a film that week because it was Barbenheimer. But actually, because it was something very different and it was a horror film, it did really well, and we sort of had a week to ourselves. But the campaign for that was really amazing. They did this. They worked with Activision, and within Fortnite, the video game, there's like there's a map called Dead Pines,
Right.
and they asked Fortnite or Activision to recreate the map of this game, sort of using everything from the film Talk to Me. So
Right.
there was a big hand in there, and you had to like sort of play the game and go on quests. It's very difficult to describe this in an audio medium.
Yeah. No, you do well with it. Yeah.
I've just realised telling this story. It's like I normally have. I've been doing lots of teaching recently, and I normally have a presentation up so
Yes.
people can see.
Yeah.
People can see. Anyway, that's just a really good example of Altitude really, getting behind their films. So hopefully Metis can do something similar. I think on the development side of things, I've got a bit more of an idea and a plan. I think obviously we mentioned before with unfortunately eOne going under and Pathé as well. You know, the British film industry is in a very interesting place, and it's not necessarily in a great place, but hopefully there's an opportunity there. And you obviously look at how well films are being released over in the States. You look at Blumhouse or A24, and I think there should be a British version of that. And so probably my taste is a little bit more on the Blumhouse side of things. So
Right.
I'm thinking, like, why couldn't there be a sort of British Blumhouse?
That's fantastically exciting, because there's not a week goes by where you don't see Jed Shepherd, the producer or host, pop up on Twitter and say, we need that. You know, where is this kind of genre love in the UK? And it's difficult to get funding for genre films, even though it makes a shitload of money. You know, it's hard. And then I read heartbreaking stories about new filmmakers not being able to get films made, you know.
Yeah, but I think Britain in particular has a great history of horror films, with obviously Hammer and Amicus.
Yeah.
You know, we do have history here of being brilliant, of having brilliant horror studios. I do think that the government has sort of helped out production with their new tax credits. So there's like a new 40% tax credit for British films under £15 million. And I think I'd love to try and make sort of high concept but low cost films. I'm thinking the likes of like St. Maud or His House, or like a British Talk to Me. Really good high quality concepts that you can make relatively cheaply, and there's definitely a market for them. So fingers crossed in the next few years I can get a couple of projects off the ground. That would be great.
Wonderful. Is that you mentioned that the holdovers conversation there? Does that conversation change since you've done it, or was it still pretty much like you're ringing up, saying your piece, and then the cinema owner's looking at the figures and goes, or is it? Because I remember a mutual friend, Jason Wood, saying it really helps if you like football, because you could ease yourself into that conversation by saying, did you see what Arsenal did the weekend, or something like that. But does it get any easier, that conversation, or is everybody has to be obviously very realistic about what they're talking about?
I think it's got a lot harder, and I think in the last 15 years, when I first started, I was working at Soda when we had 35mm prints, and I was releasing film like obscure Uruguayan films like El Baño del Papa on like 5 35mm prints, and it was doing really well relatively, but my conversations were quite simple and straightforward, and then when I was sort of at kind of Momentum and eOne, yes, you absolutely had to have very good relationships with programmers, and you would talk to them about how their weekends went. But then I think the more it switched to being mostly done on email, I think that really suits programmers, because they can be much more cut and dry and just say, look, you were ranked 5 in a 4 screen cinema, and we have 3 new films coming in, so you just can't get in. Now I think maybe I don't know, what I used to always do is just try and phone people as much as possible, and you do just have to have those try and have those sort of frank conversations on the phone about trying to stay on, but a lot of it is done on figures. And so I think maybe one of the sad things as well is that in recent years, British films or independent films, they either have really worked or they haven't done well at all. And so those conversations are much more straightforward, because it's just like, look, your film hasn't worked, so it's not staying on. We've got to play 5 screens of the new Marvel film coming in. So well done. You had a week, but you can't stay on. So it has changed. Maybe it's a little bit more transactional now, rather than as sort of personal as it once was. But I think those personal relationships are still important. You just have to really blend a phone call and an email.
Yeah. What was it like for you growing up then, and what moment in time, can you think of a moment in time where you really sort of firstly fell in love with cinema, and also that you thought working towards theatrical sales, or that was like a career route, or is it something that you fell into? Because I have to say, you're very good at it, and also I think there's something about the Liverpoolian accent which just makes me want to trust you. So it's like, I'll just go to war for anyone from Liverpool. So just carry on.
Well, to answer the first part of that question, it was 1989 at the Plaza Cinema Crosby, and my nan took me to go and watch Little Mermaid.
Gorgeous.
Yeah.
You don't need to say anything else about that. That's sort of perfect.
That's it. Question answered. That cinema, actually, the Plaza Cinema in Crosby, was opened up, I think, 25th of September 1939, and it closed 25th of September 1939, because that was when war was declared. So it opened and closed on the day war was declared. Thankfully, it stuck around, and after war it kind of reopened, and it's been going quite a while now. But that's a cracking cinema, the Plaza Cinema in Crosby. But growing up in Liverpool is Liverpool's it's a place with a very big personality, and you can't help but feel that you're molded by that personality, whether that's sort of social injustice, or humour, or music, or football. It sort of just seeps into you, really. And I think I've known quite a few Scousers that have sort of like left Liverpool, but they've always got quite a similar core to them, mostly, and so I hope that people are booking, are holding over my films, because they're fantastic, amazing films. But maybe it's because they just, they trust the Scouse accent.
And what have you seen recently that you've really liked, that you thought? I suppose this links back to the question of what a Metis film is, but it doesn't have to. You thought, I'd love to have worked with that filmmaker, or is there filmmakers out there? I'm sure there are, that you think I'd love to work with them, and I'd love to help shape and continue and support their career.
Monkey Man. Dev Patel's Monkey Man. That's I saw that recently at Bromley Picture House, and it is just terrific, bone crunching. It mixes in lots of different mythology from where he is from, and sort of Indian mythology. And it's just amazing, and really incredible. And it's great to see sort of British talent sort of make really good genre films, and in that case it's action. But I was talking to a friend of mine who's a production friend of mine, and he grew up in North London, of Italian immigrant descent, and he was saying in his school, everybody was from somewhere different. He's people from Vietnam, people from Greece, people from Italy, and so I think there's a rich, and also I think just the country as a whole. There's lots of immigrant stories here, and if you can find a way to blend the sort of people's country of origins, mythologies, and where they're from, and there's obviously a rich history, from their parents, and if you can sort of blend that with a very British sensibility and try and focus it through a sort of horror lens, or a thriller lens, or an action lens, I think you can make really exciting cinema. I think you can make really exciting films, and really exciting commercial films, and that sort of ticks all the boxes for me, really.
Fantastic. Yeah, I'm just trying to think of the name of. I played Edinburgh Film Festival, actually. You just reminded me of It was about a housekeeper and a daughter. They were cleaners, and I think her background was Thai, maybe.
Yes.
Apologies.
I've seen. Yeah,
I remember the filmmaker's called Paris, and but it rung a bell from what you were saying. So you got this whole colonial thing going on as well. But I think that's you're definitely very an exciting space to navigate and to
And aren't they his sort of servants in that as well?
Yeah, that's right.
Like, it's a big old house, and I think I haven't seen it, but from the trailer, it looked terrific. It looked really great.
Yeah, because you could really, it just worked as a great horror film as well,. But then you've got this kind of, which horror's always been great at doing, is if you can just read it on that level, or whatever is simmering underneath. It's kind of rich pickings, really. I'm just going to ask you I know it's a stressful world, it's the film industry, and also setting up your own business is very stressful, but do you find ways to kind of relax, and how do you navigate that?
Yeah, well, I think that when I was talking to you before of like my sort of mental health journey in the last 3 or 4 years has really mirrored sort of how my sort of job and kind of career has gone, and I've sort of struggled just out of lockdown, really, and I struggled with my mental health, but I started seeing a therapist, and that really massively helped.
Right.
And sort of started doing more exercise, started to just really delve into the weekly therapy really massively helped. I would always recommend that to anyone. I think, we're sort of, you and I are similar blokes of a certain age from sort of working class northern backgrounds. Out of 10 mates, I probably have 7 or 8 of them who are struggling with some issue, with some sort of mental health issue. And I've really enjoyed in the last 2 or 3 years, not like I don't want to use the word like fix, but I've really enjoyed just having a space for an hour a week to talk to somebody who isn't my family, who isn't my friends, who isn't a work colleague, and who are professionally trained about the stuff that's going on in my head. And that's really, it's completely changed my life.
Yeah, that's really great to hear. I mean, I guess it's like another form of exercise, is it? It's sort of, there's no end to exercise. It's just a thing that you do because you feel good at the end of it, and you feel like it's a release valve. And there's not. I don't imagine it's like in this next month we're going to solve why you don't like X, Y, and Z, or why you've done this. Is it, like you say, it's a way to sort of just work through stuff on your own, is it? Yeah,
it's a way to work through stuff on your own, and also the therapist gives you the tools to become your own therapist. That's the kind of goal from therapy, really. I think is so certainly from the talking therapy I did. I know there's lots of different forms of therapy, but essentially, they have a plan, which is, I think the first part of the plan is like talk about all the stuff you've sort of, the reasons why you feel certain ways about certain things, and certain things that might trigger you, and you have that's why they have lots of breakthroughs and things like that, because you realize you're sort of articulating this stuff out loud, and that is so therapeutic because it's not bouncing around your head. So you come into sort of conclusions, and then once you've identified a few sort of issues that you're dealing with, then the therapist says, okay, so here's what I want you to do next time you have, you go through something that feels like it's triggering you to react in a certain way. And so you can it gives you the tools to kind of navigate your mental health like it's a proper map, like it's a physical map. So you can like see something happening and go, oh, I know what that is over there. So, and I know how to deal with that in the right way because my therapist has given me these tools to deal with that thing in the right way. Right. And so, yeah, that's been really amazing. I've really enjoyed sort of doing that. So if I feel myself getting run down, or I just take a little stock and think, okay, physically, am I okay? Do I need to move? You talked about exercise there. And yeah, sometimes exercise helps. Also, sometimes I just feel it. I just say, okay, I'm having a sad day today.
Yeah.
So I just have to get through it and start again tomorrow, and that's okay. I'm not going to take any dramatic actions to change that mood. I'm just going to get through it. And that feels really good sometimes to sort of do. And, inevitably you do feel better the next day. But if you don't, I look at diet, exercise, who am I surrounding myself with? All those little things that you can change, really.
I got the impression that you are an X-Files fan. Would that be fair to say?
Yes, I am an X-Files fan. Yes, I weirdly, I wouldn't have said I was until you asked me the question, and then I realised that I automatically know a lot about X-Files.
Yeah, so. and you were like, yeah, great. Can we do this particular episode? I was like, no, sorry, because there's a format. But let's talk about that episode as well. So this is season 2, episode 5. Duane Barry, directed and written by Chris Carter. Chris Carter's debut as a director. Essentially, Mulder's called to a hostage situation, and the person taking this travel agent's hostage is an escaped psychiatric patient called Duane Barry, played by Steve Railsback, who claims to have been frequently abducted by aliens. Just straight off the bat, I thought this was a fantastic episode, and it starts in a great way. Really, sort of the camera's navigating this sort of dilapidated house. There's a dog running around. And then we get to Duane Barry's on a bed and he's about to be visited by these, conventional aliens, looking grey aliens. There's a bright light and he gives out this terrifying scream. And then he says, not again, not again. And we realise this is not the first time that this has happened to him. And then we're into the show. So what did you think of this particular episode when you watched it?
I thought it was classic X-Files.
Oh, gorgeous.
It was very, very classic X-Files. You've got your aliens. You've got Mulder going out, being rogue and, really believing it, asking questions about his sister. You've got Scully saying, hang on, mate, there's an explanation for this. And it was almost like X-Files bingo. You were like, this is it. You're hitting every single thing. This is pure nostalgia. I also thought it was really well filmed and really well shot. There's lots of shadows in here. There's it's shot on 35mm. It looks like anyway. It's got that lovely grainy feel to it, and I was like, these are really well made episodes of TV. Of course, it looks a bit shonky by today's standards, but if you think back then, each episode of the X-Files was it was a mini film.
Mm-hmm. No, definitely, and I think it is. This particular episode is Carter's directorial debut, but he had a lot of help from David Nutter, who's a X-Files director. He directed a lot of great episodes. So I think there was certainly a bit of Carter going off to the side and saying, well, how do I do this? What do I do? How do I show that? And it's really, sort of testament to how much of a great director that David Nutter is as well, that he was able to kind of guide this. And because it's great. It's really, really tense. And we get some great stuff in this. We get Chich Pounder, who is in a lot of Marvel films now. And she's fantastic as well. She pops up to sort of... she's the one who sort of gets Mulder in to be a kind of hostage negotiator. Brought in, because of his background and his, that he's. I wouldn't say he's probably the first person I'd call a hostage situation.
No, definitely not. There's a really funny unintentional bit where they're like, "Now then, Mulder, we need you to empathize with him, but don't empathize with him too much, and don't indulge in his delusions. But the reason you've been brought in is because you kind of believe this weird, crazy alien shit. So and then obviously as soon as Mulder goes in, he just throws the rule book out the window and he says, "I believe you. Where were they? Why?"
And it's great that the Duane Barry character used to be part of the FBI, so he sort of sees through all those tricks. So we're already like you say, the rule book's thrown out the window, and we're just. Yeah, we're into a whole new world, but also, get to see Mulder in some really tight speedos. That's great. At the beginning of the episode, just totally unnecessary. Krychek's in this. Well, you're right. You're totally right. It's like a X-Files bingo. It's like Krychek's in it. Scully's doing Scully. She has a bad run from this point on. Firstly, she gets abducted by Duane Barry at the end of this episode. Put in a trunk of a car, then gets abducted by the aliens, and then she's off for a bit.
I obviously had to watch the follow up to this because I was like, oh, Chris has given me one that isn't self-contained. Damn him! I now have to it's got a cliffhanger. Yeah. So this morning I've been watching the second one. I was like, it's not ended on the second one. I've got to watch another one.
Yes.
And so it's like, oh, this is classic 90s cliffhanger, serialization of TV, but very good.
Yeah, it's fantastic, and it just moves at 100 mile an hour because they've got to rattle through all this in 42 minutes or however long it is. But
yeah. And I'm quite obsessed with like old film noirs from like the 40s and 50s, and that is essentially what each X-File episode is like a mini little like old studio noir. Because the first they're doing Barry episode, that's basically almost like a bank robbery hostage situation gone wrong, right? Lots of tension there, and then the second episode is just like a proper like thriller with Mulder being. I mean, the back of my knees went funny on that stunt when he's on the cable car. I was like, this is really well filmed. I mean, I know he's not up there, but it feels like he really is up there.
You know, like I say, by the second season, they've established what the show is, so they really can go for broke. You know, they don't really need to establish what the characters are anymore. We know what the relationship is between Mulder and Scully, or where it's going. You
got Mitch Pileggi. I love that guy as Skinner. I've got a VHS copy of Shocker, the Wes Craven film from the 80s, in which he's a psychopathic serial killer who is sent to the electric chair, but of course he ends up getting turned into electricity and can navigate via telephone wires to anywhere he wants and sort of take over people and sort of be reincarnated or take over the bodies of other people.
Wow, right. I've made a note to sort of just find out. I love that. Can you imagine the casting process? It's like, we've got a great one for you, Mitch. What's it like? It's a bit like an X-Files episode. It's like, we got on board Wes Craven, great, I'm on board.
And you got the smoking man in this one as well, haven't you?
Yeah, he's fantastic. He's... I think he gets called Cancer Man at one point in one of the episodes, but then they quickly ditch that because they realise it's fairly offensive.
Do you know what? Also, what I was also thinking this morning is like, what a terrible habit for someone who's meant to be a clandestine agent to have, to just literally leave cigarettes everywhere you go. So you're like, oh well, he's been here because there's a load of ciggies. Like, that's rubbish.
Yeah, there's definitely an episode where Mulder does just that and opens a kind of ashtray and there's fag ends in there, and he's been here. That's who's done that. But
I did want to talk to you about Arcadia as well, because that was my
So this is the other episode when that I callously said we couldn't talk about, but we can. But yeah, so I was just googling it then, so I've got a kind of vague idea what it's about, but I don't remember it at all. So what goes on in that one?
It's amazing. I think it's one of the best episodes of the X-Files ever, and just of like TV in general. So Mulder and Scully have to go undercover to a gated community, and they have to pretend that they're married, because people in this gated community are going missing for some reason, and you don't know why. And basically, David Duchovny, he's clearly way more at home doing comedy than he is doing straight acting, and he just really goes for it. It is really genuinely funny. He, like, at one point, they're discussing why someone is going missing. Mulder's obviously saying it's probably something to do with aliens, and Scully gives a long, very sensible answer about what it's more than likely to be. Mulder just says, "Woman, shut up and make me a sandwich."
Right.
Okay. Because they're married, and so he just they take all the stuff they've worked up in this like first 4 or 6 seasons and just blow it all up in this sort of little contained comedy show. And she's really like, next time we go undercover, we're not being married, or I'm gonna. Yeah, it's really. I mean, that's just one example. I'm not too sure that joke really translates now to today, but it's very funny when you watch it.
Yeah, there's some of it where, like I mentioned this before in another episode, with Scully's interactions with the lone gunman and some of their pretty sexist jokes about Scully, that she just tolerates. She just rolls her eyes and goes, That's the lads, together. Where, if you were writing it today, you'd just be like, right, you're off to HR, Lone Goodman. Or, she'd probably take them to task a bit longer. And there's maybe it does, I don't know. It does well, I think, to sort of firstly paint her as the skeptic rather than the believer, which is totally radical for, 80s, 90s television. And there's the episode season 1, Jersey Devil one, where she goes on a date and, she's obviously thinking about work the whole time. But then I was watching that going, is she thinking about work or is she thinking about getting back to Mulder? I just don't know. Anyway, because I'm not like I wish they hadn't got together. I just like keep it. Look what happened to Moonlighting. They ruined it. It's like just keep it professional, people.
Always keep it professional. Look at like Ted Lasso, the 3 seasons of Ted Lasso in between like Hannah Waddingham and Jason Sudeikis' character. They just kept it apart, and good, because you need to keep that tension. Once that tension's over, you're like, well, what's the point?
Exactly. So do you think now, you're all in now, aren't you, from what I can hear? Are you going to rewatch it again?
I've got to... I hate you, because I've now got to watch all 250 bloody episodes of this, whilst also keeping up with Baby Reindeer on Netflix or whatever app I've got out, or Fallout on Amazon Prime. And this is another thing that this is something else, this is a separate point that I've got, which is that I think we're training a new generation of cinephiles, because people are just watching, maybe not even a generation, just everybody is getting smarter at watching things because they're watching stuff all the time. So they're noticing angles when things are real or aren't real. And I think what seems strange to me is like streaming companies or Hollywood, they seem to be content. They seem to really be galloping off in the wrong direction and making their content dumber or not as smart, or maybe using AI or over relying on CGI. But the audience is getting smarter, so you have to watch out for that. So I am hoping and sort of gambling on the fact that if I can try and make or distribute really smart genre things, then there's an audience for it.
Yeah, and a longevity of that audience. I know it's not going to be immediate sort of in a sort of cinema tickets returns, but investing in stuff that might get discovered on DVD, might get discovered on streaming, and I know your background's in theatrical sales, but allowing for people to kind of come to it, because like you say, there's so much to navigate in content wise, and I hate that word content, but I just have to be really, really ruthless, and it's to sort of the detriment. I feel bad for content makers, TV makers, filmmakers, because I look at it, I go, is it 5 stars? Is it from HBO? Is it from FX? Otherwise, how am I going to slot this in? And now, 10 years ago, I'd have been like, I'll give this a chance. All those conversations, that phrase that gets wheeled out, you've got to watch the entire first season first to get to season 2. It's like, no chance. I can't.
No chance. Every parent's like, is every episode 20 minutes? Because that's about all I've got before I fall asleep.
Yeah, well, I just finished watching How To with John Wilson. I don't know if you've seen that.
Yeah, that's
just
great.
On another level, just really exciting documentary filmmaking, and that's all free on iPlayer. But I was like, this is it. This is the stuff.
Yeah, I really like the thing I really like about that is that the image and the sound are sort of diametrically opposed almost for the entire episode, and so you really have to concentrate on what it is you're watching, which is really great, I think.
Yeah.
Like he's not explaining what the image you can see. He's talking about the motivations behind what the image that you're seeing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I always wonder how it's made. Does he? Is himself? I presume it's only a small production team. Are they just Googling strange folklore and strange things that happen in New York, and then going off, like in one episode he goes off to a largest pumpkin event competition, and another one, the last episode's just, he ends up at like a cryogenics facility in the middle of nowhere. It's just wild. But I wonder if it does come together in the edit, that narrative comes together and the title of the show comes together in that edit, or whether it's a bit more freewheeling. Because I was watching it going, not that he's deceptive, but is he coming into speaking to these people he's interviewing with his own agenda, which he must be, but he hides it so well, and he comes across in such a way where he can kind of speak to anyone and ingratiate himself, because he is a kind of nebbish sort of, he's got his glasses and his beard, and he can kind of fit in, and he looks like the sort of people who would go to a Hoover, a vacuum cleaner convention or something. So I'm fascinated to know, but also I don't want to know, because it's like, no, actually keep the magic.
Yeah,
keep it alive.
You don't want to see the strings. But also, I want to talk to you about the Twisters remake. It's happening, mate.
Yes, I am on board with it. What do you think?
Yeah, I can't wait. I think everything Glenn Powell is in at the minute is just amazing. He's great in Anyone But You. He's great in Hitman, which is coming out soon.
Looking forward to that. Yeah,
and I just think it's just it's an excuse to revisit extreme weather movies. So I think, and like, if this kicks off more extreme weather films, then I'm in. I want to see the return of the disaster flick. Yeah.
Yes.
Even if it's not brilliant, I think it will still be really fun and really worth a watch. Funnily enough, I went to do some teaching the other week at the University of Westminster, and it was like a 3-hour session, and the students had to present a sort of distribution plan for a film, and one of them picked Twisters, and they went, it's based on this really old movie called Twister, so we think an older audience will come along to it because they'll be nostalgic for the first one. And I'm like,
lovely stuff.
But yeah, with a great Pound Brigade, Chris, like, it's basically like they were thinking that's like the version of like King's Speech or something. It's like, oh Christ, is this what's going to happen?
Yeah,
it's happening.
Believe Me is written and edited by me, Chris Boyd, with production support from Steve Marshall. The music is by Johnny Boyle, and our logo is by Russ Brown. If you like the show, please do hit subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and we'll see you out there next time.